This is Social Leopards. I'm Bea.
And I'm Beth. A leopard is a solitary creature living in the jungle but often not seen or noticed. Are you a solitary creature trying to navigate the social jungle?
This show explores loneliness and the many ways forward. Welcome to Social Leopards.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am Beth.
And I'm Bea.
And we are here today to continue our series on emotional wounds. What topic shall we choose today?
Humiliation.
Humiliation. Okay. So I think I'll start by saying, as we work to improve ourselves, I think that in order to be your best self, it's important to feel confidence. And that helps you with the ability to tackle things like loneliness head on and to get there in a way that you can go out and you can make meaningful connections. So how do we do that? We prioritize our own happiness, right? And
Yes.
our own well-being.
Yes.
And one of the ways that we can do that is to tend the wounds from our past. So tell us a little bit about the humiliation wound.
So I remember distinctly when I went to church as a child, and if I were to miss a Sunday Mass, how much abuse I would get from my parents and from the priest, because we were pretty regular, and I really felt horrible about myself and didn't really know what to do. And I, of course, had to go to confession and say many Hail Marys to make up. But I feel like that was probably not the right thing to do to a child, because things happen. I had a game that I had to play, like a tennis game, and I had to be there. And so there was like, they didn't care about that.
Right.
The expectation is you had to be at church no matter what. So I think that's tough to be able to have to do that all the time. You don't know what to do with those feelings. You don't have any other opinions, just the ones that your parents tell you. So then you have these horrible feelings of humiliation.
Yes.
What do you remember?
I think for me, it came from bullying, the shame that came from being told that I wasn't enough for peers, or I was too this, I was too emotional, I cried, I was a crybaby, I was this, I was that, I was the other thing. And over time, I started to feel shame and humiliation over the fact that I didn't seem to measure up to somebody's standard. And when you're young, those standards are super important, right? And I just posted on our social media, actually, somebody else's post. I did a repost. And I know this isn't like new or anything like that, but the way that they presented it was as a father with his children. And he said, if you tell your kids that there's a Santa Claus, they're going to believe you. If you tell them that they're going to get money if they put their tooth under a pillow, they're going to believe you. And the same is true if someone tells you that you are ugly, or you are clumsy, or you are not meeting a certain physical standard. Guess what? Those kids are going to believe you.
Yeah, they internalize those feelings for sure. And then you don't know how to get rid of them, and you start believing them, and you start acting that way too. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think.
It does. And it starts very early. We start comparing ourselves to others. We start learning right and wrong, sometimes not in the best way possible. If it isn't parental, it is school-based. If it is not school-based, it is church-based. There are so many opportunities to find a different way to perceive yourself that it's a wonder any of us turn out without any scars.
Yeah, I think that the trend, or it was the trend, I think in the past, criticism was what people used to control their children and to discipline them. And I think that it's hard, even now in the schools. It's like the phrase now, the catchphrase is catch them when they're good. And that's tough because it's so easy to just criticize and correct versus say something that's positive.
Gotcha. Textbook-wise, experiencing humiliation is ridicule or belittling, particularly in a repeated or in a public manner. And that can deeply affect a person, especially a child. And especially when it comes to feelings of self-worth and feelings of confidence. It can lead to feelings of shame and a tendency to hide or withdraw from other people. So I think that's what we've been talking about, all of those things that happen. So many of us who were bullied as a child do have a humiliation wound somewhere in there, whether we're conscious of it or not. Some of us have been able to put it off to the side and it doesn't impact us as much as others, while others still feel it very deeply, and it's very easy to reopen that wound and feel that pain with the smallest of slights. How do you know that you have a humiliation wound? I happen to have a little list here. Identifying it can be a little bit challenging, especially if the feelings or behaviors have become part of who you are, your everyday life. So here are some signs that might indicate that you do have a humiliation wound that needs tending. I think the most obvious one is low self-esteem.
Absolutely.
So that is identified by persistent feelings of inadequacy or not feeling worthy of someone else. What's another one?
Intense shame.
Intense shame.
We just talked about that you're feeling so shameful and so maybe even anxious about a situation that's disproportionate to what you really should be feeling, but you don't have any other ways to interpret that,
right?
Because no one's giving you the tools for that, so you just continue to feel ashamed.
Yeah. This next one kind of surprised me. Perfectionism is another sign that you may be hiding an emotional wound of humiliation, because you're constantly striving to overcome through finding that perfect answer to behave differently or look differently, and anything you can do to avoid the criticism that you have felt in the past that caused you to feel humiliated.
And also the avoidance of social situations, which we talk about that because then again, you think you're going to be judged. And so you avoid that feeling of judgment because that makes you feel probably more humiliated.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one that we talk about quite often is negative self-talk. This comes up in more than one emotional wound, I'm sure, but frequent self-criticism is one of the outcomes of being criticized or feeling humiliated. And so we were talking with Leon McFadden last season,
yes.
And he said something about you say things to yourself that you wouldn't say to a friend.
Exactly.
And so next time you're talking to yourself in or you're talking to yourself in a negative manner, think about that. Would I say that to any other human besides myself? Because why do I deserve that?
Yeah, and that goes with any of these things we're talking about, because you would never say that to anyone. You would support them instead, because it's the natural instinct is to support people. Right. If you're a socially aware person, you want people to feel better and do better. But yes, it's interesting if you reframe that. I think it's a good idea. Then you're not going to criticize yourself as much.
Yeah, exactly. So consider talking to yourself the same way that you would talk to others, I think is a really great message.
And people pleasing, this is an interesting one because I feel like that applies to a lot of different things. I was just thinking to myself the difference between a kind person versus a nice person, right? The nice person is going to be the one that's going to people please. The kind person is going to be the one that's going to have the confidence and is actually not going to feel the need to do that. So that's very interesting. But I think that people pleasing can go along with a lot of other things, not just humiliation, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. I think a lot of this overlaps. And I think as we get through this series, we're going to see some of those times when it does. Another one is, and it goes along those same lines, is of what I was talking about just a minute ago, is sensitivity towards people who do give you criticism later in life. Even if that criticism is meant to be constructive, that wound can start opening up and you get very defensive very quickly. Instead of just being open to the words being said, you can do the opposite and you can close down right away to protect yourself. And so that is another sign that is the wound that is opening up instead of being able to be open. So that's another one.
What else?
I think... Yeah.
Isolation.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've talked about that kind of, just the avoidance of social situations is the same thing of isolating yourself to protect yourself, again, from other people that could possibly criticize you.
And that comes anytime we're feeling bad about ourselves or bad about a situation, the tendency to self-isolate can happen. But if you're doing that with regularity, then that could be one of the signs that this wound is impacting the way that you view life and cope. And then I think the last one, I think there's defensive behavior. So when you do get aggressive or just highly defensive, you're feeling a threat. And a lot of times it isn't what the person intended, but that's what you're feeling. And so that is how you react. And so that's another sign.
Yeah. And then fear of vulnerability, which is what we're just talking about, just being afraid to open up and be vulnerable. Because again, you think you're going to be humiliated if you
Right.
really tell someone how you feel. And also that fear of rejection if you say the wrong thing, all those things we just pretty much talked about.
Judgment too,
Judgment,
right? We
yes.
always say don't judge a book by its cover. And this is the reason, because we don't know what someone else is going through or what kinds of feelings they're processing at any given point. And so when we take somebody at face value, that can be very dangerous. And it goes both directions, right? It's when I'm interacting with you and you're feeling hurt, I may have to try to be aware of that. Or when you're dealing with someone who has a humiliation wound, to be aware that person may be a little bit more sensitive or a little less willing to be open and vulnerable. Patience goes a long way in understanding and empathy. All of those things are some of the things that will help.
Yeah.
So healing from an emotional wound of humiliation involves building that self-compassion and resilience. The part that everyone probably wants to hear about are strategies,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
To
Yeah.
try to help us navigate
There's
that
always
journey.
a strategy.
Yep. So do you want to start us out on strategies to help get over a humiliation wound?
Sure. So we have to acknowledge our feelings, recognize and validate the pain and shame you feel from past humiliations, and accepting emotions is the first step toward healing. And I think journaling is probably a great way of acknowledging those feelings. What do you think?
Yeah, to try to put them down on paper and look at them maybe when you're not feeling as intensely
About them.
so that you can get some more objective self perspective, right?
Yes.
Right. Another one is to practice that self-compassion, of course. That's a given, right? Treat yourself with the same kindness like we were talking about a few minutes ago, and understanding at the same level that you would offer a friend or a family member. Everyone makes mistakes. No one is perfect. The word perfect doesn't really exist unless you're a divine entity. And everyone even feels some level of embarrassment at one point or another. It is unavoidable in life and in situations. I asked a question the other day at work, and apparently it was a pretty basic question that I guess I should have known, but I didn't. And I laughed it off, and it was slightly embarrassing, but I didn't beat myself up about it. I was like, that was a naive moment, and I'm relatively new in that role, so hopefully everybody will give me a pass.
They will.
So I try to dismiss it and minimalize it so that it doesn't bother me. I can see 25-year-old me, if I would have asked a question and somebody would have quickly corrected me in a public setting, I might have felt very differently then than I do today.
I agree with that. Yes, I would too.
And that comes from the self-confidence of having lived through many slight embarrassments.
Exactly. It's life experience. Yeah.
Yes.
So we talk about, let's see, practice self-compassion.
Yeah.
So, we talked about, challenge negative self-talk. That is a good one. Replacing harsh self-critical thoughts with positive affirmations and focusing on strengths and achievements. That's huge. That's a great one.
Yeah.
I don't think we do enough of that.
Yeah, we don't spend enough time in the positive space celebrating the things that we do. I think that's an important thing for us all to realize.
Yes, yeah.
We are so quick
Yeah.
to be down on ourselves, and we don't really take time to appreciate ourselves for the things that we do.
It's true. We don't.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know why that is the way it is, but it just seems to be, right? And so seeking support is another one. So being able to be open with friends and family about how you feel, a therapist or a coach, if you don't have someone in your life that you feel like you can open up to. Sometimes it's easier to open up to a stranger than it is to open up to someone that you know really well. Sharing feelings helps you gain perspective and feel less alone.
Yep.
And a lot of times you get some of that acknowledgement that you really need, or to feel like you're not the only one in the world who has experienced something. Yeah. I think when we were talking to Megan DeVito a couple episodes back, she said something about, hey, I promise you may feel silly, but I know I've heard something same or similar to what you're about to share with me. And so it's okay. I'm not going to think that it's dumb or it's silly or it's wrong. And I think when we're feeling those moments, we do feel very alone in those moments. Like we're the only ones who could have ever experienced something this painful or this humiliating or this embarrassing or this sad. But in reality, many humans have gone through at least similar things as the ones that we've gone through.
It's encouraging to remember you are never alone.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. So developing resilience is another thing that has been a theme this season. A lot of our coaches that we've spoken with, a lot of people who feel like they have found ways forward, have spoken with us about the ways that they have gained resilience in their life. So I think that is achieved through engaging in activities that give us confidence, give us purpose, and that will build that resilience, because we will gain that self-confidence as we're doing things that seem important to us and our hearts and our brains.
And also setting boundaries is another very important thing to protect yourself, not only from further humiliation, but also just to recharge. I know when I spend too much time doing too many things and don't give myself a break throughout the day, I get very tired and my perception of situations changes and I become very easily overwhelmed. So I think it's very important to set boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agree. Practicing mindfulness is another strategy to help get present in the moment. So that would include things like meditation, deep breathing, just quietly observing the room around you and the things. It resets your brain to a certain extent. You can start to feel the breaths calm down, your heartbeats start to slow, and get yourself back to a place of, reason and calm. That's so important. And staying present and reducing that anxiety when the humiliation part starts to take over your brain, puts you into a spiral. I think it's important to get back out of that spiral and remember, hey, this isn't happening right now. This isn't what just happened. This is something from long ago that is still impacting me. And that's identifying that is the key to shutting it down.
And also, research says you have to practice meditation for 10 to 15 minutes to make it impactful.
Okay.
Yeah, so it has to be a good 10. And that makes sense because your brain starts to relax after about 5 minutes, then after 5. Yeah.
Learning from experience is always a good one, right?
Yes.
If we can. And sometimes we have to learn and then we have to learn again and then we may have to learn again. But reflecting on the things that have hurt us in the past and identifying the lessons learned goes along with some of the other strategies that we have spoken about today about setting boundaries in specifically. I think that using those insights to grow and to make positive changes in your life is definitely a way to start feeling more self-confident.
Yeah. And of course, a very important one is focusing on self-care. We know we do not do enough of that. Just making sure that each day we have some time to do the things that we love, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a particular person you want to spend time with, whatever it is, just to give yourself, or even schedule a time with yourself, an hour, whatever time you have during the day to do that. And it's going to really make a huge difference on your perspective of how you feel.
Yeah. So I stumbled across on Reddit, Congrats Like I'm 5 is one of the subreddits. And it can be entertaining, but what I end up seeing are a lot of people who experience depression, humiliation, other wounds you can clearly see from the words, and they are like, congratulate me like I'm 5 because, and that's the kind of the theme of that subreddit. And sometimes it's something like, I washed my hair today, or I took a shower, I got out of bed. And you know what? Sometimes that's telling me that person hadn't done that in a while, and they finally got themselves to the point where they were able to do that. And yeah, you want to laugh, right? You're like, oh man, I could go 24 hours.
Yeah, we take that for granted.
Right? But wow. Yeah. And I always congratulate them because I can't scroll past it.
Yeah, but that's sweet. That they need that support.
Yes. Yeah.
I know the people that have like the one disorder or disease that comes to mind is fibromyalgia. And I remember when I was assessing at high school level years ago, and there was a parent of this student that I was assessing who had just been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and it was a new diagnosis. And this was one of the things she struggled with, getting up and getting out of bed each day.
Oh, yeah. I can't. Oh, God bless you. That's where we're at. It is very difficult, and I think it's hard for some people to even understand the struggles that others face. And so that goes right along with don't judge a book, right? And having empathy for others and practicing compassion as well as self-compassion. Those things are so important. So when we had the episode about abandonment wounds, the very first thing that we talked about as a strategy for that wound was forgiveness. Right. But this one comes up at the end of this list because forgiveness is also important for our growth as we heal from these emotional wounds. Why? Because we have to move past them, right? You might have to forgive someone from your past for the things that they did to hurt you, the bullies in the classroom, who hopefully grew up to be good adults who regret, and some don't, right? But we don't have to forget or forgive them personally. To forgive yourself for letting that pain impact you for so very long, and congratulating yourself like you're 5, right? Yep. For moving beyond it. Yep. In order to start to truly heal.
Right.
Yes. So letting go of grudges, I think, is where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I think that's very difficult. I think it's very important, but very difficult sometimes. It depends. I don't know. It depends on how long ago it happened and what was the grudge that you had. So it depends on the type of grudge, I think. But yes, forgiveness is a challenging one.
It always is, right?
Yeah.
Yes. But holding a grudge takes a lot of energy.
That's true. Yeah, right? It does.
And so think of how you could take that energy and turn it into something that serves you.
Right.
Instead of continues to hurt the other person. I think that's
like reverse psychology.
Yes.
That's a good, I like that. That's a great one.
Yeah.
And then of course we have to protect ourselves from the wounds of humiliation. And so one thing we can do is be mindful, that if somebody is triggering you by crossing your boundaries, try to recognize that and try to protect yourself from that.
Right. As a child, you learn to respect your elders and pretty much respect everybody, right? Respect is something that gets drilled.
It does.
Obedience gets drilled into your system. And I think as an adult, we can be more discerning about who is deserving and worthy of our respect. I think a lot of people spend parts of their adult lives trying to be respectful of people who just don't deserve the respect. And I think that's part of that boundary setting.
It's complicated because imagine if you're in a group of friends and you have some friends that you really care about, and I'm speaking from personal experience, and there's a group member who you have a different perception of their character than your particular friend, and it's tough to disrespect that person because you want to be part of that group. So you have to make those choices. Is it worth being part of that group, or how do you change the dynamics? It becomes very difficult.
I think I need to probably say I would not willfully disrespect another person, right, even if they're not worthy of my respect. Right. I'm just not going to give them my time and my right energy and my attention.
Right. Exactly.
I'm going to distance myself to the greatest extent possible. That is the difference between being polite and being a friend. I think a friend you can say anything to in a respectful manner, and including constructive criticism, and you will get through it. Someone who is not open to that kind of feedback, I think you learn over time. Yeah. And I no longer, I should say, waste my time and energy trying to fix a problem that isn't mine to fix.
That's true. So I guess to reframe what I said, if you're in a social situation with this individual, you may just not interact with them a lot. You're just going to say hello, you're going to be polite, but you're going to keep your distance because you know who they are. And I guess it's not our job to make other people aware. They have to learn for themselves, because that would be disrespectful to gossip. We don't want to do that unless it's absolutely necessary in certain situations. Just kidding. No. If somebody's having a big problem, we're trying. No, I'm kidding. No, we shouldn't do that.
And I think this goes along with people's true motivation. When someone's actions do not align with the words that come out of their mouth, I think that's the one that, as an adult, we probably see most often. They say one thing, do another. So this is another sign that you might not feel safe being completely vulnerable with that person. And it's okay to have that distance, to protect yourself, to not put yourself in harm's way, so that you have to fight those feelings of humiliation if you don't fully trust the person. If someone doesn't make you feel safe, then there is no trust, and there actually is no safety if you don't feel it.
That's true. Yeah.
And I know you could say something that would be hard for me to hear, but I have 110% trust and safety with you. So I know that when you tell me that you're not trying to harm me,
No.
you're trying to help me. If that, I can't even come up with an example because it hasn't happened in forever.
But you haven't done anything that you need help with at this point.
At this point, but I know it's coming. Everything in a safe relationship is, I don't know how else to say it, but it feels like it's going to be okay, right? Yes. But when someone is spewing empty promises, or they're saying disrespectful things, or they apologize for the things that they do, but they're constantly finding themselves apologizing, but then not able to alter their behavior, I think those are the types of things that are big red flags for me. And that's I'm going to put that protection wall up, and I'm going to distance myself from that kind of behavior.
I think some people, men and or women, think that if they apologize for something they've done, then that's okay. It's more about changing that behavior, because you can't apologize a million times and keep doing that. It's not going to change the situation or help the situation.
And this should not be confused with telling somebody that they need to change.
Right.
Because guess what? I can't change you. You can't change me. I am who I am. I can want to change, and that'll be successful because I have made adjustments in my life. I was not always this soft and gooey, but I wasn't always this empathetic. I honestly wasn't. I had a more straight and narrow view of life, and I didn't always see things from other people's perspective when I was young. And so you learn these things over time, and you can either be open to them or you can continue following that same path. And you find all levels and all widths and breadths of that as you encounter other individuals, right? True. Not everybody is as good at flexing or adjusting or having grace for someone else's behavior. I know when my good friends are just having a bad day, as opposed to that's their actual character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So also this ties into this general lack of mutual effort towards growing and repairing or sustaining a relationship. So what you just said, when you're the only person that's trying and you're not seeing reciprocation, it may be time to move on, to protect yourself so that the wound doesn't reopen. And it's very difficult, I think, to cut yourself off from a relationship with someone who a relationship that you've had with someone for a long time, even if you think it's toxic, because you're so used to that person. And there's that level of comfort and predictability. So it takes, I think, a lot of effort to do that. And I think that's why people end up struggling with humiliation for so long, because if this is a person who's been part of your life since you've been young, get used to the pattern of behavior, and it's hard to move on, or if it's your family that do it to you, how many people can really say, I'm not going to contact my family anymore, I'm just going to walk away? People do that in extreme situations, but if it's that middle of the road, you come into your parents' house and they say, oh, you've put on weight. And this is what, my 90-year-old father will tell me, you look fat again. He's 90.
It's a laugh but don't laugh situation. Exactly. Because it's so uninformed, and so inappropriate.
Exactly.
But because he's your dad, you're going to forgive him for it, and you're still going to love him despite it.
Exactly.
But maybe love him in a slightly different way. But you don't have to appreciate it.
Oh, it's just it's rude. It's just disrespectful. But he is 90. But
I think you look fabulous.
Oh, thank you, likewise.
Knowing that you have a good match, I don't know if that's the right word, is the opposite of these things, right? So when you're thinking about people that you're interacting with, you can see when someone is respecting your boundaries. You can see when they're thinking about you rather than themselves at every moment. And if there is a rare misstep, you should be able to see acknowledgement from that person, right? That they have accepted responsibility, especially if, and I'm thinking of someone very dear to me that I have a relationship with, and sometimes I'll say what's on my mind and then they'll become offended because I know that they're very sensitive, right? And they have some deep emotional wounds that need tending and are not tended at this moment. But what I end up doing is I accept responsibility for saying those things. I said them with good intent. It was not, I did not purposefully mean to hurt that person's feelings, but I know that person's feelings are easy to trigger these wounds that she has. And when I am in a frame of thought and I'm trying to get like a feeling out or some guidance or whatever it is, sometimes I do take a misstep, but I immediately acknowledge and I'm accountable to that. And so I think that's what keeps the relationship healthy, is that we are able to move beyond that. And she knows that I never do it like
on purpose,
to try to hurt the person's feelings.
Right. So you're saying that you have integrity, because usually your words match your actions, which is very true. I think you do have a lot of integrity. We always look for that as a quality in friends out there. Integrity is very important. And you're very vulnerable. You openly share feelings. I pretty much know where you stand, which is great. There's no confusion there. And I think it's tough to have relationships with people who cannot open up to you, because you never know what's happening with them. It's just always just nebulum, like, oh, what's going to happen today? Or are they going to say this? Are they going to do this? Are they going to show up? Or they're going to not show up? We have a friend who will try to make plans with you numerous times and then never show up, and then does it again. And then, so it's, what's going on there?
Yeah.
It's hard to trust then.
It is. It does make trust hard. And then without trust, you can't have safety. So it's very circular, right?
It is, yeah.
Initiating contact. So sometimes you can tell if someone is really safe, a safe space is like, I share something about something that is happening. I don't even have an example up in my head right now. And then that person takes the moment a couple of days later to follow up and say, hey, how did that work out? How did that go? Or whatever it was. And you know what? I immediately, when someone like will follow up on something that I felt was like just an offhand comment, like I just said it, and then they take the time and effort to check back in with you. Oh my gosh, that's like gold
huge.
to me.
That's huge.
Gold to me.
Yes.
And you cared enough to remember that I had said that thing.
It was important enough that you remembered, and yes, because like you said, we get so busy, a few days have probably gone by. But yes, that is like gold. I agree.
Yeah, so I think that's another sign that somebody, and if you feel good after interacting with someone more often than you feel down, I think that there's nothing worse than like having someone in your life where you just dread the interaction because you know it's just going to be full of
drain your energy.
Conflict or these put downs or passive aggressive behavior, whatever it is. I don't want to be with those people. I don't want to spend large amounts of time. We have some group situations where I'm really more thrilled to see some people than others. And it isn't just because I don't know them as well. It's just maybe somebody is always there to monopolize a conversation and no one else can get a word in edgewise. And I'm trying to encourage some of the quieter people to participate or something like that. And I know it's not going to happen because like certain people are there and they're going to be like the middle of the center of the conversation for the whole time. So I've got to find another opportunity to engage with certain people in those situations.
Yeah. Or someone's difficult or very guarded. I'll say guarded, where they're just never going to let you get past a certain level. You keep seeing them again and again, and you feel like you haven't developed a relationship with them. That's also difficult too.
And I don't know what causes that. I'm sure it's some emotional wound that they are guarding very closely. But we also can't fix people. We have to focus on ourselves, our feelings, our reactions, our actions.
That's right, we do.
We can't like worry about what the other person is all about or what they're saying. And when you reach those kind of roadblocks, if you try to penetrate that, right? If you try to keep going and you get pushy about it, it's going to come out as what's wrong with you.
Yeah, exactly.
And we don't want to do that either, right?
Yeah, that's
so
exactly
sometimes
right.
backing off is okay too.
Yeah.
We're not here to solve the world's problems. That's just, we would love to.
Yes. So, what expectations should we have when it comes to relationships in general? So, one is to make the first move. Don't assume that someone is not interested in you because they didn't initiate. We talk about that a lot, though. And I think it's difficult to always make the first move in every social situation. You also have to figure out if this is the right one, if this is conducive for you to make the right moves. So those things need to be considered too, I think.
I wouldn't invite someone that I knew to be shy, as an example, to some raucous party where I know there's going to be a lot of drinking and a lot of boisterous behavior or something like that. I would prefer to do like a museum trip or a brunch or something that's a little bit quieter and more open to just some
More
chit-chat.
conducive to talking. Yes.
Yeah. Time and a place for everything. And I think another one that's important to mention is don't have an expectation that there will never be conflict in a relationship. No relationship is daisies and sunshine all the time, because guess what? We're people, right? And we're going to perceive things differently. We're going to have other things going on in the background, like we've talked about this whole episode, that the other person may not be aware of. And that can definitely impact the way that we react and the way that we interact with others any given day. So when there is conflict, or something that's just a point of disagreement.
Yeah, for sure.
We've got to be open to that, and it's okay to disagree sometimes, right? And have different views. And this is not a political podcast, but there is a lot of politics talk that goes on every single day right now in our country.
Sure. Yes.
And I have taken a stance that I am going to allow everyone in my life to have their own opinion, and I am not going to debate it. I know what I believe. I'm just not comfortable getting into large debates about it. And I know that some people will probably send us an email and tell us that that I'm a terrible person for thinking that way. But I don't need that level of conflict in my life. I will take the actions that I believe are appropriate. I am not laying down and not standing up for my rights in any way, shape, or form. Those are the types of things, like those kinds of conversations come up in group situations. And there are ways to very calmly discuss large topics without it becoming an argument. It doesn't have to be an argument.
Yeah, I think being open to hearing other people's perception and trying to understand why they believe what they believe is very important. And then you don't have to assassinate them or criticize them for their belief, because everyone comes from a different perspective. But I think in that way you can have a calm conversation and not make it into a debate. But I'm always interested in hearing what people believe and why they believe the way they do. And I think I would leave it at that.
Yes. And I think my point is I don't want it to turn into something that gets very heated.
Yeah.
There's not any place for that, and I don't think it's necessary. I think it's okay. And I think I am also very open to understanding both sides of every argument. But yeah, right now it's just really tough because some people are very bulldog with their opinions. And so it's really rough out there right now.
And then here's another expectation for relationships: admitting that you're having a bad day. Sometimes I have a hard time with that, but I think it's great to tell someone I'm not feeling well, I'm tired. And then don't expect me to be at my best. So if I say something that's just not what I usually would say, then please forgive me. I think setting that up is probably a good idea.
Another thing, and it happened to me yesterday at work, and someone said, I just need to vent. And I'll tell you what, when somebody says, I just want to vent, they just want to vent. They don't want advice. They don't want to be fixed. And that is the hardest thing for me, is I want to get some words in there. And I did get some words in. I'm not going to lie. But I tried to respect the person, and I did start with, I hear you, because I didn't want to dismiss or minimalize what that person shared with me. But sometimes you just need to get feelings out. And you have to do that in a safe space too, right? And even though I am the pot calling the kettle black, I think that's the old saying. Yeah, that's one I'll probably work on until the day I'm gone. Yes, if somebody just says, I just need you to listen to me. I don't want advice. I don't want you to fix me. I don't want your side of the story. I just want to be able to get out what I want to get out. Yes, I try really hard to do that. And that's a skill that I think just needs to be constantly honed.
Maybe. Yeah, I guess it depends what mood you probably are in, depending on how much advice you're going to give that time or what the topic is. I feel like if it's something that you feel strongly about and you're seeing some things that can be changed, that you're going to comment. But if it's something that truly you don't have an opinion on, or it's not going to affect you, then you probably would be able to listen more. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think it depends on the topic too.
Yeah.
Definitely. I agree. Thank you for that moment of grace.
Sure.
I think another one that often is difficult for people is acknowledging an awkward moment and being strong enough to say, oh, I think I've hit a nerve. And you may be convicted in whatever you said that hit the nerve. And so it's not important. And I know another thing that, and I mean, my husband, he wants to be right sometimes, right? I think just sometimes, most of the time. And I appreciate him very much. But sometimes I do have to say, are you just continuing this conversation because you need to be right? Or is it okay that we have a difference of opinion here? And it's like a, what moment? I didn't realize that was where this was going. And so sometimes just hitting the nail on the head is the best way to stop the argument, because it's okay. And then the other thing is, if you did hurt somebody's feelings, even if you feel like you're right, it's okay to say, I am so sorry that I hurt your feelings. That isn't where I was going with this.
But I'm still right.
Exactly. And you can think that way back here, but let's not.
You're always right.
Uh-huh.
Does that make you feel good?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. But I think that's, or I am so sorry. I went on a tangent and I misunderstood you. That's another way to go.
Yeah.
And if things are a little bit hot, then in order to protect that humiliation wound, to feel safe, you can say, let's table this for a hot minute and let's come back to it when we're both not so emotionally charged.
Yeah, I think that's true. Giving yourself space and time is always a great idea.
Yeah.
And so all of these things can bring strength and flexibility to each relationship that you hold dear, and hopefully will reduce feelings of humiliation over time. And I think that these really are actually solid tips to tend to most emotional wounds. And give yourself grace.
Give yourself grace, people.
And try to give others compassion and patience.
And I think that is everything we can say about...
Yes, I think we've beaten that one to death.
Yes. Ooh, I think that just triggered an emotional wound there.
Oh.
Beaten that one to death. Until next week, everybody.
Take care.
Bye. Hey, Social Leopards. Don't slink back into the jungle quite yet. We have 2 important messages to share. First, remember to like this episode, drop us a comment, and if you haven't done it yet, follow this show or subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can reach us on social media. You can also email share@socialleopards.com to contact us privately. All links are in the show notes. We love and appreciate hearing from those who listen to the show.
Second, we want you to know that this show is not intended to be a replacement for professional therapy. If you are struggling or if you need to interact with another person, check out the show notes for resources. Thanks for listening.